He treated the servant like an equal, not knowing she ruled the stars. Outpost at the edge, Neven Karras wiped sweat from his brow as he crawled from the narrow maintenance shaft of Station Epsilon. The dim emergency lighting flickered, casting long shadows across the corroded metal floors. Outside the viewport, the dying moon Thalos loomed, its cracked surface glowing a sickly amber as the system's red dwarf star struggled to illuminate it. Karras, the atmospheric regulators in the officer's wing are malfunctioning again. The harsh voice of Commander Vex echoed through the corridor. The Arcturian officer's 4 violet eyes narrowed with contempt as he approached. His scaled skin shimmered iridescent purple under the station lights. Fix it before the cycle ends or you'll be docked rations. Again. Neven straightened his back, ignoring the ache of 12 hours crawling through the station's innards. Yes, Commander. I'll see to it immediately. Commander Vex snorted, the gill-like structures on his neck flaring. You humans. So fragile, so slow. He strode past, deliberately bumping Neven's shoulder with enough force to send him stumbling against the wall. Station Epsilon housed 37 personnel, 4 Arcturian officers, 22 mixed-species technicians, and 11 humans relegated to the lowest tasks. The station's official purpose was monitoring the unusual radiation patterns of Thalos as it disintegrated, but everyone knew the truth. It was punishment duty, a place to send those who had fallen from favor. Neven gathered his tools and headed toward the officer's wing, nodding to Marisa, another human engineer cleaning conduits nearby. They're in rare form today, she whispered. Supply ship's been delayed. 3rd time this rotation. Great, Neven sighed. More protein paste for dinner. The station's mess hall was nearly empty when Neven finally arrived 4 hours later, having fixed not only the atmospheric regulators but also 3 broken water recyclers Commander Vex had forgotten to mention. He collected his meager ration, a gray protein cube and synthesized water, and collapsed into a seat at the farthest table. He was halfway through the tasteless meal when the door slid open. A woman he'd never seen before entered hesitantly. She wore the simple gray uniform of station maintenance, but something about her seemed different. Her silver eyes scanned the room with careful precision. Her movements were measured, graceful, as though she were consciously trying to appear ordinary and not quite succeeding. You're new, Neven said as she passed his table. She paused, regarding him with those unusual metallic eyes. Yes, I arrived with the maintenance shuttle this morning. I'm Neven, engineer, mechanic, plumber, and occasional therapist for malfunctioning droids. He offered a tired smile. Taylira, she replied after a moment's hesitation. I've been assigned to cleaning duties. There was something in her accent he couldn't place, not quite Centaurian or Proximan, or any human dialect he recognized. Before he could ask more, Commander Vex's voice boomed from the doorway. Servant, you were instructed to clean the officers' quarters, not socialize with the dregs. The Arcturian pointed a clawed finger toward the exit. Go. Taylira's expression didn't change, but Neven noticed her fingers curl slightly at her sides. She nodded once and turned toward the door. Wait, Neven called. He held out half of his protein cube. They never give new transfers enough to start. Take it. Her silver eyes widened in surprise, darting between his face and the offered food. With delicate precision, she took it from his hand. Thank you, she said, the words carrying a weight that seemed disproportionate to the small gesture. As she left, Commander Vex sneered at Neven. Wasting rations on servants? Pathetic. Neven watched Taylira's retreating form, noticing the straight line of her back, the deliberate grace of her steps. Something about her called to him, a dignity that didn't belong in a station servant, a presence that seemed to bend the stale recycled air around her. That night, as station lights dimmed for sleep cycle, Neven lay on his narrow bunk staring at the ceiling. He thought of silver eyes and wondered what storms were hidden behind them. Small kindnesses, the next 3 cycles passed in a blur of broken filtration systems and malfunctioning gravity plates. Neven found himself looking for Taylira during his shifts, catching glimpses of her silver eyes as she moved through the station with quiet efficiency. Unlike the other cleaning staff, she worked methodically, observing everything with careful attention. On the 4th cycle, Neven was repairing a ventilation shaft when he discovered her sitting alone in a small observation alcove, staring at the dying moon outside. Beautiful, isn't it? He said, setting down his tools. In a tragic sort of way. Taylira turned, surprise flickering across her face before she composed herself. I've never seen a celestial body in its death throes before. The patterns in the surface fractures are fascinating. That's one way to look at it. Nevin settled beside her, leaving a respectful distance. Most people just find it depressing. Most people don't truly look. Her voice carried that strange melodic accent. They see what they expect to see, Nevin smiled. Is that why you observe everything so carefully? I've noticed you watching. A faint purple blush colored her cheeks. I'm learning. This environment is new to me. First station assignment? She nodded, though something in her hesitation suggested more complex truths. Well, it's not all bad, Nevin said, pulling a small packet from his pocket. The Arcturians may be terrible, but we humans have our ways of making life bearable. He opened it, revealing dried fruit, a rare luxury, smuggled from the last supply ship. Want some? Talira stared at the offered food as though it were precious gems. She took a piece with careful fingers and tasted it, her eyes widening with genuine delight. This is extraordinary. Just dried peaches, he laughed, but I'll take the compliment. From that day forward, they developed a routine. Nevin would find excuses to work near where Talira was assigned, and they would share moments of conversation between tasks. He showed her hidden corners of the station where the recycled air tasted almost fresh, and she shared observations about stars visible through the viewports, naming constellations he'd never heard of. How do you know so much about astronomy? He asked one day as they shared his lunch ration in a maintenance corridor. I was educated in celestial navigation, she replied carefully. The stars have always been my companions. Seems wasted on cleaning duty, perhaps, but I'm learning more here than I ever could from star charts. Her silver eyes met his. About people, about kindness. When Commander Vex discovered them talking during a work shift, he assigned Nevin to clean the waste processing units, the most degrading task on the station. That evening, Talira appeared at his quarters with medicated salve for his chemical-burned hands. You shouldn't risk punishment for me, Nevin said as she gently applied the ointment. You do the same for me daily, she replied, her fingers lingering on his palm. No one has ever seen me before. Not truly. I find that hard to believe, Nevin said softly, aware of their sudden proximity. You're the most remarkable person on this entire station. Talira's silver eyes shimmered with emotion. For a moment, Nevin thought she might say something important, something hidden. But instead, she simply squeezed his hand and whispered, Thank you for making me visible. Later that night, as they sat together in the observation alcove watching the stars, Talira's head rested lightly against his shoulder. In that moment, despite the dying moon outside and the decay of the station around them, Nevin felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Tell me about your dreams, she whispered. Nothing grand, he admitted. To fly free, maybe. See those stars up close instead of from behind viewports. What about you? She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then so softly he barely heard. To rule with knowledge of what it truly means to serve. Nevin didn't understand the weight behind those words. Not yet. Whispers of another world. The first sign that something unusual was happening came when Station Epsilon's communications array began intercepting encrypted signals. As the station's senior maintenance engineer, Nevin was tasked with checking the equipment for malfunctions. Nothing wrong with the hardware, he reported to the operations officer, a sour-faced Arcturian named Lieutenant Mavis. The signals are external and they're increasing. Mind your station, human, Mavis snapped. Leave communications to your superiors. But the strange signals continued. Within days, the Arcturian officers grew tense. Commander Vex began conducting surprise inspections, scrutinizing every corner of the station. Talira was reassigned to the command level for cleaning duties, and Nevin saw her less frequently. When they did manage to meet, in stolen moments between shifts, something had changed. Talira seemed preoccupied, her silver eyes often distant, troubled. What's wrong? Nevin asked one evening, finding her alone in their observation alcove. You've been different since the signal started. She looked at him, conflict evident in her expression. Nevin, if I weren't who you think I am, if I were someone else entirely, would it change how you see me? That depends, he said carefully. Are you a secret Arcturian spy? Because I've told you some pretty treasonous things about Commander Vex's parentage. Her laughter, rare and musical, eased the tension. No, nothing like that. Then I don't care. He took her hand, no longer shy about the contact. I care about the person who notices when the station's recycled air smells different in each section, who memorized the names I gave to each of the maintenance droids, who sneaks extra rations to Marisa when she's working double shifts. Talira's eyes shimmered with emotion. I wish it could be that simple. Why can't it be? Instead of answering, she leaned forward and kissed him. The touch of her lips was soft, hesitant at first, then deepening with surprising intensity. Nevin pulled her closer, his hands tracing the elegant curve of her spine. For that moment, the dying moon and decaying station faded away, leaving only the silver of her eyes and the warmth of her touch. When they finally parted, breathing heavily, Talira rested her forehead against his. I never expected to find you here, she whispered. At the edge of everything. I'm glad you did, he replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Even if this station is falling apart around us. That night, in the privacy of Nevin's quarters, they discovered each other with tender curiosity. Talira's skin carried faint markings that seemed to shimmer in the dim light, patterns like constellations trailing across her shoulders and down her back. When Nevin traced them with his fingertips, she shivered with pleasure. These are beautiful, he murmured against her skin, like star maps. In a way, they are, she admitted, her voice hushed as she guided his hands over her body. They tell the story of where I come from. Their connection transcended the physical, each touch a conversation, each kiss a promise. In the aftermath, as they lay entwined in the narrow bunk, Nevin felt as though something profound had shifted in his universe. I think I'm falling in love with you, he confessed to the darkness. Talira's arms tightened around him. And I with you, she whispered, which makes what comes next so much harder. Before he could ask what she meant, the station's alert system blared to life. Red emergency lights pulsed throughout the corridors. Nevin jumped from the bed, pulling on his uniform. That's the proximity alarm, he said. Something big just entered our orbit. Talira rose with calm purpose, her earlier vulnerability replaced by a strange, regal composure. It's time, she said, more to herself than to him. Time for what? Talira, what's happening? She met his gaze, silver eyes reflecting the pulsing red alerts. The truth, Nevin. It's time for the truth. As they dressed hurriedly, Commander Vex's voice echoed through the station's communication system. Attention all personnel. An unidentified vessel has entered our orbital space. All staff are to remain at stations. This is not a drill. Nevin moved toward the door, but Talira caught his arm. Whatever happens next, she said with unexpected intensity, remember how you see me now. Remember this was real. Before he could respond, she was gone, slipping out the door with a grace that suddenly seemed less like that of a servant and more like something else entirely. Something powerful. Something sovereign. Empress revealed. The unidentified vessel dwarfed Station Epsilon, its sleek silver hull reflecting Thalos's amber glow. It was like no ship Nevin had ever seen. Not military, not commercial, but something else entirely, with elegant, flowing lines that suggested both beauty and devastating power. Station personnel crowded the viewports, whispering anxiously. Commander Vex stormed through corridors, barking orders and demanding reports from frantic communications officers. They're hailing us. Sir? Lieutenant Mavis reported as Nevin entered the command center to check emergency systems. But the language! Our translators can barely process it. Put it through, Vex demanded. The station's speakers crackled with a melodic, complex language that sounded strangely familiar to Nevin. It took him a moment to place it, the same accent, the same musical cadence as Talira's speech. They're requesting permission to board, the communications officer translated haltingly. They claim to be Imperial representatives. Commander Vex's scales rippled with tension. Imperial? There's no empire in this sector. They insist on immediate boarding, sir. They say their empress is already here. A cold realization washed over Nevin. He backed away from the command console, slipping out unnoticed as the officers argued frantically about the proper response. He found Talira in the main docking bay, standing alone before the massive airlock. Gone were the gray maintenance clothes. She now wore a simple white tunic that seemed to shimmer with embedded light. Her posture had changed completely. The careful submissiveness had vanished, replaced by a straight-backed authority that commanded the space around her. Talira, he called softly. She turned, silver eyes finding his. Neven, I hope to have more time to explain. You're not a servant, he said, the pieces finally falling into place. You never were. No. Her voice carried new resonance. Though I have learned more about true service in these weeks than in centuries on my throne. The airlock hissed open behind her. 8 tall figures entered in perfect formation, wearing armor that shimmered like liquid starlight. At the sight of Talira, they immediately dropped to one knee, heads bowed deeply. Empress Talira Celastris, the leader intoned, the celestial dominion awaits your return. Neven stood frozen as Commander Vex and the other officers burst into the docking bay, weapons drawn. They stopped short at the scene before them. What deception is this? Vex demanded, his voice rising in panic as he looked between Talira and the kneeling soldiers. Talira turned to face the Arcturian, her entire being seeming to illuminate from within. No deception, Commander. Merely a truth you were not equipped to see. With a simple gesture from her hand, the weapons the officers held deactivated, power cells dimming. I am Empress Talira Celastris, sovereign of the Celestial Dominion, ruler of the 7 spiral arms, and guardian of the eternal flame. Her voice echoed with authority that seemed to vibrate through the very structure of the station. I walked among you to understand the true condition of those who serve at the farthest reaches of known space. Commander Vex fell to his knees, his purple scales pale with shock. Your Imperial Majesty, he stammered, had you known, you would have treated me differently, she interrupted, and I would have learned nothing of value. Her gaze swept over the gathered station personnel. I have seen how power corrupts when disconnected from those it affects. I have witnessed cruelty justified by rank and kindness offered despite it. Her eyes found Neven's softening momentarily, and I have discovered that true nobility has nothing to do with titles. The lead soldier approached with a crystalline circlet. Your crown, Empress. As Talira accepted it, the metal seemed to flow between her fingers, reshaping itself before settling on her brow. The transformation was complete, the humble servant now unmistakably sovereign, radiating quiet power. Commander Vex prostrated himself fully. Please forgive our treatment of your Majesty. We had no idea. That is precisely the problem, Talira said, her voice cold. You believed you were mistreating someone powerless, and you did so without hesitation. Why should that deserve forgiveness? The Arcturian had no answer. Neven stood apart, his world unraveling and reforming before his eyes. The woman he'd shared dried peaches with, who he'd held through the night, who knew his dreams and fears, was the ruler of an empire he hadn't even known existed. Talira turned to him, and for a heartbeat, he saw uncertainty in those silver eyes, fear perhaps, that everything between them had changed. Empress, he said, the title awkward on his tongue. She approached him slowly, the soldiers and officers watching in stunned silence. Is that all I am to you now, Neven Karis? She asked softly. A title? I don't know what you are to me, he admitted. I thought I knew you. You are the only one who truly does. She extended her hand, not imperiously, but as she had done in their quiet moments together. Come with me. There are stars waiting to be seen up close. Beyond the stars, the Imperial vessel, the Astral Covenant, was a marvel beyond Neven's imagination. Corridors of living crystal pulsed with soft light. Gravity shifted seamlessly between sections, and viewports revealed the stars with such clarity they seemed close enough to touch. Yet despite the wonder surrounding him, Neven felt adrift. 3 days had passed since they'd left Station Epsilon. Talira, Empress Celastris, as everyone called her, had been consumed with Imperial business, leaving him to wander the vessel escorted by silent guards. On the 4th day, he found himself in an observatory dome at the ship's crown. The entire ceiling was transparent, revealing unfiltered space in breathtaking detail. Thalos and Station Epsilon had long disappeared behind them. Do you regret coming? Talira's voice came from behind him. Neven turned to find her standing in the entrance. Gone were the elaborate robes she'd worn for official functions, replaced by a simple tunic reminiscent of their time on the station. I regret not knowing who you really were, he answered honestly. She approached slowly, silver eyes searching his. I showed you who I really was, Neven. The title, the crown, those things are what I wear, not who I am. An empress who scrubbed floors and fixed air ducts. An empress who needed to understand what life truly is for those who sustain her empire. She stood beside him, looking up at the stars. I have ruled for 3 centuries, Nevin. 300 years of reports and advisors and carefully managed appearances. But I never truly knew what life was like beyond my palaces. So I was part of your research? The words came out more bitterly than he'd intended. You were the unexpected variable. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining with familiar warmth. The person who saw me when I had deliberately made myself invisible. Do you understand how revolutionary that was? How it changed everything I thought I knew? Nevin looked down at their joined hands. I'm just a maintenance engineer from a forgotten outpost. No, she said firmly. You are the man who treated everyone, from droids to fellow engineers to a disguised empress, with the same fundamental respect. Do you know how rare that is? How precious? For the first time since leaving the station, Nevin truly looked at her, past the title and the revelation, to the woman with whom he'd shared those quiet moments. What happens now? He asked. I don't belong in your world. Perhaps it's my world that needs to change. She led him to a control panel, activating a holographic display of swirling galaxies. The Celestial Dominion spans 3 major systems and 27 inhabited worlds. For centuries, it has been governed from a distance by those who never experienced the consequences of their decisions. She waved her hand, and the display shifted to show various outposts, stations, and colonial settlements, places like Epsilon, where people lived hard lives at the Empire's edges. My first decree upon returning was to replace every commander like Vex with those who had shown compassion and fair judgment to their subordinates. My second was to establish direct communication channels between these outposts and the Imperial Court. Nevin stared at her in wonder. You're reforming your entire empire because of what you saw on our station? Because of what I learned from you. Her silver eyes held his gaze steadily. Empires rise and fall, Nevin, but the truth I discovered is eternal. Power without compassion is meaningless, and authority without understanding is doomed to failure. She stepped closer, her hand rising to touch his face. I don't want you as a subject or a consort or a trophy. I want you as my equal, my reminder of what true nobility looks like, my connection to the reality my position too easily obscures. I know nothing about ruling, he said softly, and I knew nothing about serving until I met you. She smiled. We will learn together. Talira's hand slid to the back of his neck, drawing him down until their foreheads touched, an intimate gesture that felt more significant than any imperial ceremony. The people at court call you my weakness, she whispered. They don't understand that you are my strength, the bridge between who I was and who I must become. In that moment, beneath the infinite stars, Nevin finally understood. Their connection had never been about status or power or even the physical attraction between them. It was about recognition, 2 souls seeing each other clearly across the vast divides of circumstance. I love you, he said simply. Empress or servant or anything in between. Her smile held all the warmth of distant suns. And I love you, Nevin Karras, the man who taught an empress the true meaning of sovereignty. Later, as they lay together in chambers that rivaled the size of entire station levels, Talira traced the line of his jaw with delicate fingers. I've been thinking about Thalos, she said thoughtfully. That dying moon we orbited, what about it? Its destruction was preventable. The fractures could have been stabilized centuries ago, before they became catastrophic. She propped herself up on one elbow. I've dispatched scientists and engineers to assess if it can still be saved. Nevin stared at her in amazement. You're going to rescue a dying moon? I'm going to try. Her silver eyes gleamed with purpose. And then we're going to examine every neglected corner of the Dominion, every station like Epsilon, every overlooked world, every place where people have been forgotten. That could take lifetimes, Nevin said. Talira smiled, the starlight from the viewport catching in her silver eyes. I have time if you do. She kissed him softly. After all, a ruler should never walk alone, and I have no intention of ever letting you go. 6 months later, they stood together on the observation deck of the newly rebuilt Station Epsilon. Beyond the viewport, Thalos glowed not amber but vibrant blue, its surface stabilized by technology only the Celestial Dominion possessed. The station itself had been transformed from a punishment post to a center for scientific research and cultural exchange, staffed by a diverse crew selected for their competence and character. As the first delegation of scientists from 5 different systems arrived through the main airlock, Tylera squeezed Nevin's hand. "From the edge of everything to the beginning of something new," she murmured. Nevin smiled, watching as former enemies worked side by side, unified by common purpose. Not bad for a maintenance engineer and a disguised empress. "The best disguise," Tylera said, "was making myself invisible. You made me visible again." She turned to face him fully. "And now we'll do the same for everyone else in this empire. Ensure that no one remains unseen, unheard, or forgotten." Above them, stars stretched into infinity, no longer distant points viewed from behind dirty viewports, but promising worlds waiting to be transformed by the most powerful force in any galaxy, understanding born of love.